The anomaly in the ruins. The orbital ruins of Theros Station hung like a broken necklace around the dead moon. Juno Reeves maneuvered her salvage ship, the Rusty Fortune, through the scattered debris with practiced ease. Her hands moved across the controls with the confidence of someone who had navigated these hazardous fields for over a decade. Worthless, she muttered, scanning another segment of the abandoned research station. 3 hours of careful navigation and she had found nothing but corroded metal and radiation-damaged equipment. The station had been abandoned for nearly 70 years after a catastrophic reactor failure, leaving behind a graveyard of technology too damaged to salvage but too dangerous to ignore. Juno's scanner beeped softly, drawing her attention to a section she hadn't explored before. A small structure, still mostly intact, floated at the edge of the debris field. According to her charts, it was Laboratory Module 7, not on her original search pattern. Might as well check it, she told Otto, her ancient service droid who clicked in agreement. The companionship of the outdated machine was better than none at all in the silent void. The Rusty Fortune eased alongside the laboratory module. Juno pulled on her exosuit, its worn seams and patched sections telling stories of countless excursions. Monitor comms, Otto. Standard protocol, if I don't check in every 15 minutes, start the retrieval program. The airlock cycled, and Juno pushed off into space, her tether connecting her to the ship. Magnetic boots engaged as she landed on the laboratory's hull. Using her plasma cutter, she carved an entry point through what had once been an emergency hatch. Inside, the laboratory was surprisingly intact. Emergency lighting still functioned, casting an eerie blue glow across abandoned workstations. Juno moved carefully, her helmet light sweeping across the room. This place was sealed tight, she said, her voice transmitting back to Otto. Radiation levels nominal. Whatever they were working on, they wanted it preserved. At the center of the lab stood a cylindrical chamber, its transparent walls still intact. Juno approached cautiously, using her scanner to check for hazards. Inside the chamber was a crystalline formation unlike anything she had ever seen, approximately the size of her palm, with facets that seemed to shift and change as she observed it. Otto, are you getting this? She asked, transmitting visuals back to her ship. The droid's response came back as a series of anxious clicks and beeps. Yes, I know it's not on the manifest, she replied. But this is definitely not natural. The crystal seemed to pulse with an inner light that responded to her presence. As Juno moved around the chamber, the light followed her, tracking her movements. She checked her scanner again, no radiation, no detectable energy emissions, yet somehow, the crystal was active. I think it's watching me, she whispered. With careful precision, Juno bypassed the chamber's lock and opened the sealed container. The air hissed as pressures equalized. She reached in with a gloved hand, expecting the crystal to be cold, but instead felt warmth radiating through her protective gear. The moment her fingers made contact, the crystal's light intensified. A soft vibration traveled up her arm, not unpleasant but definitely alien. The crystal shifted, its facets rearranging themselves as if responding to her touch. What in the void? Juno gasped as the crystal seemed to melt into a gelatinous form that wrapped around her gloved fingers, not aggressively but with curious intent. She should have dropped it. Every salvager knew the first rule: if something unexpected happens, let go and retreat. But Juno couldn't. The crystal, or whatever it was, wasn't threatening her. It was communicating. Otto, prepare the containment unit, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I'm bringing something back, and it's definitely alive. Back aboard the Rusty Fortune, Juno placed the crystal being in a transparent analysis chamber. It had returned to its crystalline form but continued to pulse with light that seemed to follow her movements. Otto rolled nervously around the chamber, his sensors scanning continuously. I need to report this, Juno said, reaching for her communications console. But before she could activate it, the crystal flashed brightly, and every electronic system on the ship flickered. Otto powered down completely, then restarted, his optical sensors blinking in confusion. The ship's engines shut off momentarily before humming back to life. "What did you do?" Juno asked the crystal, which pulsed in response, almost as if apologizing. She should have been terrified, but something about the crystal's presence felt familiar. Not threatening, but desperately trying to communicate. With hesitation, Juno placed her bare hand against the chamber wall. The crystal responded immediately, moving to the edge of its container to align with her palm. A sensation unlike anything she had experienced before flowed through her, not words or images, but pure emotion. Fear. Urgency. Hope. The crystal wasn't just alive, it was sentient, and it had found her deliberately. "You wanted to be discovered," she whispered. The crystal pulsed in confirmation. Juno's hand trembled as she pulled it away. This was beyond any protocol. Beyond the jurisdiction of the Salvagers Guild. This was first contact with an entirely unknown form of life. "Otto, set course for Helio Station," she said, her decision made. "And encrypt all logs from today. No transmissions until we reach Dr. Vander." As the rusty fortune pulled away from the ruins, Juno couldn't tear her eyes from the crystal being. She had searched abandoned wreckage for over 10 years, looking for valuable technology and resources. Instead, she had found something that would change everything, a life form unlike any known to humanity, and it had chosen her. What she didn't yet understand was why the being felt such overwhelming urgency. What message was so important that it had waited in an abandoned laboratory for decades, hoping to be found? As the ship accelerated toward Helio Station, Juno had no way of knowing that the fate of entire civilizations might depend on her delivery. The research bay of Helio Station hummed with activity as Dr. Farid Vander carefully adjusted the environmental controls around the containment chamber. His weathered face, lined with decades of scientific pursuit, remained focused despite the extraordinary circumstances. Behind him, Juno paced nervously, her salvager's vest still covered in the dust from Theros Station. "I've been studying xenobiology for 30 years, Dr. Vander said, not looking up from his instruments. Yet I've never encountered anything remotely similar to this specimen." The crystal entity pulsed gently in its chamber, its light following Juno's movements even as she walked back and forth across the laboratory. "It responds to me," Juno said, stopping to place her hand against the chamber wall. "Like it's trying to communicate." Dr. Vander straightened, brushing a strand of silver hair from his face. "Fascinating. Most first contact protocols assume communication through sound or visual patterns. This appears to be attempting something more direct." The laboratory door slid open as Beckett Rhodes entered. The ship engineer's hands were perpetually stained with mechanical lubricant, his utility belt heavy with tools that clinked as he walked. "The diagnostics are complete," he announced, dropping a tablet onto the workstation. Every system on Juno's ship recalibrated itself after contact with the crystal. It didn't damage anything, it optimized them. Dr. Vander's eyebrows rose. "Optimized?" "The Rusty Fortune's engines are operating at 118% efficiency," Beckett explained, scratching his beard in bewilderment. "Power consumption is down, response time improved. It's like someone rewrote the system architecture while keeping the original framework." Juno turned back to the crystal, which pulsed more rapidly as she approached. "It's not just alive," she murmured. "It's intelligent. Possibly more advanced than we can comprehend. We need to establish formal communication protocols," Dr. Vander began, but was interrupted by a sudden fluctuation in the laboratory lights. The crystal entity flashed brilliantly, and every screen in the laboratory activated simultaneously, displaying cascades of data too rapid to follow. Otto, who had been powered down in the corner, suddenly reactivated, his mechanical limbs moving with unusual fluidity as he approached the chamber. "Otto?" Juno called out, concerned. "What's happening?" The service droid didn't respond in his usual series of beeps but instead extended a manipulator arm toward the chamber. The crystal pulsed in rhythm with Otto's movements. "It's using your droid as an interface," Beckett said, watching in amazement as Otto's display panel began showing symbols unlike any programming language he'd seen. It's trying to establish communication parameters. Dar. Vander rushed to his console, fingers flying over controls. Recording everything. This is unprecedented. A completely novel approach to cross-species communication. For 20 minutes, they watched as Otto and the crystal entity exchanged data, the droid systems temporarily repurposed. When Otto finally turned toward them, his visual receptors glowed with an unfamiliar blue light. This unit has been temporarily modified to facilitate communication, Otto spoke, his usual mechanical voice now carrying subtle harmonic undertones. The entity identifies itself as Lumina, a sentient crystalline collective dispatched from the Meridian cluster. Juno stepped forward. What does it want? To warn, Otto replied, the crystal pulsing with each word as if emphasizing the message. Lumina's civilization detected a disturbance in the cosmic fabric traversing this sector. They dispatched messenger entities to warn potential sentient species. Dr. Vander leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding caution. Warn us about what? The laboratory lights dimmed as Otto's display projected a three-dimensional image of what appeared to be a nebula cloud, dark and ominous. The Void Eaters approach. Ancient entities that consume technological civilizations. They have awakened from dormancy and have begun their harvest cycle. Beckett snorted skeptically. Sounds like something from an old spacer's tale. The crystal flashed, and Otto's projection changed to show planetary systems going dark, one after another. The Meridian cluster was among the first to detect the pattern. 73 years ago by your time measurement, they began dispatching warning messengers. Lumina has waited at the Theros station since the facility was abandoned, conserving energy, hoping to be discovered. Juno remembered the overwhelming sense of urgency she had felt when first touching the crystal. How long do we have? Uncertain, Otto translated. The Void Eaters move in patterns difficult to predict. They could arrive within one orbital cycle of this system's outermost planet, or it could be several cycles. Dr. Vander had begun frantically taking notes. Can they be stopped? Communicated with? The Meridian Collective attempted communication, Otto replied. Those who established contact were the first consumed. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. Beckett was the first to speak, his earlier skepticism replaced with grim consideration. If this thing is telling the truth, we need to alert the Planetary Alliance immediately, he said. This goes beyond Helio Station's jurisdiction. Dr. Vander nodded slowly. Commander Lindquist needs to see this. But we should proceed carefully, this information could cause system-wide panic if mishandled. Juno hadn't taken her eyes off Lumina. There's more, isn't there? She asked softly. Something you're not telling us. The crystal's light dimmed momentarily before pulsing again, slower and more deliberately. Otto turned toward her, mechanical head tilting slightly. The Void Eaters are attracted to specific energy signatures, the droid translated. Particularly quantum communication networks and dimensional fold engines, both technologies your species has recently developed. Beckett cursed under his breath. The entire Alliance infrastructure runs on quantum networks. And every military vessel uses fold engines for faster-than-light travel. Then we're broadcasting our location like a beacon, Dr. Vander concluded, his face pale. Every transmission, every jump. The crystal pulsed urgently, and Otto stepped closer to the containment chamber. Lumina possesses knowledge of adaptive technologies that could shield your systems. This is why the Meridian Collective sent messengers rather than broadcasts, to provide not just warning, but solution. Juno felt a weight settling on her shoulders. When she'd found the crystal in that abandoned laboratory, she'd hoped for a salvage bonus, maybe enough credits to repair her ship properly. Instead, she had stumbled upon what might be humanity's only hope against an existential threat. How do we begin? She asked. The crystal brightened, its facets shifting into a new configuration. Through Otto, Lumina responded, First, Lumina must establish deeper connection with a compatible organic mind. The knowledge cannot be transferred through mechanical means alone, it requires neural pathways to fully translate. All eyes turned to Juno. Compatible mind, she repeated cautiously. You have already established initial harmony, auto-translated. The connection can be completed, but the process carries unknown variables for your physiology. Dr. Vander stepped forward protectively. Absolutely not. We need to study this further before attempting any direct neural interface. But Juno was already moving toward the containment chamber, her mind made up. If these void eaters are real, we don't have time for cautious research protocols. Juno, wait, Beckett reached for her arm, but she shook him off. I found Lumina for a reason, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And I'm not going to let an entire civilization fall because we were too afraid to act. As her hand reached for the chamber release, the crystal's light engulfed the room, marking the beginning of a connection that would either save them all, or change Juno in ways none of them could predict.